Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we welcome you once again to the airwaves of Salam Media. It is Wednesday nights and it is in conversation with myself, Inayat Wadi. And as we have been doing for well over 18 months, week after week, day after day, our focus has been on Palestine and covering Palestine from various angles. And one will recall South Africa and the case to the ICJ. Now, tonight we are going to be taking a look at the ICJ hearing, the latest hearings that are taking place. And once again, what has come to the fore is Israel and its flagrant disregard for international law. So, a large part of the discussion is going to be focused on what is taking place and the submissions that have been made and what can be expected, and we will do some analysis with my guests tonight. We've assembled quite a powerful panel. We've got Professor Mazin Qumsiyeh, Director of Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability and Palestine Museum of Natural History from the Bethlehem University. We've got Bana Abu Zuluf, a Palestinian PhD researcher in international law in the School of Law and Criminology, and also member of Good Shepherd Collective in Bethlehem. And Shabnam Mohamed, Shabnam Palesa Mohamed, I must say, who needs no introduction, an activist, journalist, and lawyer, ILCP Africa coordinator, founder, African Sovereignty Coalition, and SAMEC Alliance. To all my guests, as you appear on screen, Assalamu alaikum, welcome, and an absolute pleasure having all of you with me this evening.
Walaikum salam, Inayat, and shukran for this incredible opportunity.
Thank you.
Well, it certainly is. And, Shabnam, I think I'm going to start off with you because you and I had a discussion just as recent as yesterday where, we have been talking on a number of issues, and particularly with regard to lawfare as far as the Zionist entity is concerned, and taking a look at these latest rounds of hearings at The Hague regarding Israel and its obligation under international law. And perhaps just by means of introduction, just your thoughts in terms of the significance of these hearings.
So, Inayat, thank you for the question. These hearings are profoundly significant because they're addressing not only allegations of the genocide in Gaza and Palestine broadly, but they're also interrogating the structural legality of Israel's unlawful occupation of Palestinian territories. For the first time in decades, there's now the serious momentum behind holding Israel accountable, apartheid Israel accountable for decades of impunity. And this legal scrutiny through the platform of the ICJ is occurring within the highest court in the international system. So it is a landmark development, and it is a moment where civil society, legal experts, and governments who have shown their solidarity with the Palestinian cause are converging to say enough is enough. So it is certainly a pivotal moment in history, and it needs support and it needs the spotlight that we are giving to it, including through this program.
Shukran for that, Shabnam. And let's just ask Bana as well, just to comment on what Shabnam has been saying. And Shabnam has been talking about a landmark development, talking about, the momentum that the legal challenge against the Zionist state of Israel is actually gaining and gaining traction right across the entire world. Your thoughts, Bana?
Yes, I must add just that we had an advisory opinion on the illegality of occupation. So we are well aware that the occupation is illegal, but that does not mean that the occupying power does not have obligations to make sure that they act in the best interest of the occupied people. This is what international humanitarian law, international human rights law let us know. So this is quite very significant. We see a lot of interventions from different countries that are highlighting these type of obligations that the occupying power should have have. There's a specific mention, of course, because this discussion has been around humanitarian aid, facilitated humanitarian aid. And also there's a specific discussion about starvation as basically a weapon of war.
Yes, and let's bring in Professor Mazin into the discussion now. Professor Mazin, we've seen until now the impunity within which the occupying entity has been acting at this point in time, and also in terms of their total disregard for international law. Now, clearly, this case has been a history in the making. But also at the same time, one must not lose focus and one must not lose sight of the fact of the impunity within which the Zionist entity, and we've seen even in terms of their response to what is playing out in The Hague at this point in time.
Yes, indeed. What we are seeing is a remarkable condition of state above so-called international law. Either that international law has exceptions for chosen people, so to speak, self-chosen, supported by the US, or that there is no international law, that we might as well dispense of it because it's totally useless and has not been able to stop an ongoing genocide. Even in the past 24 hours, many children were killed in Gaza. So the ongoing genocide is proceeding unabated. Starvation is setting afoot in Gaza, famine imposed by the colonizing power, basically. There's an extermination campaign, and international law is shown to be not functioning because, the case that was brought in by South Africa was about more than a year ago. So what is happening? Why isn't it stopping? Why is the so-called civilized world, Europe and North America and Australia, why are they letting this continue, using their weapons and their money and their resources? They are partners in this crime. And we, the Palestinians, are feeling like this is the straw that breaks the camel's back of international order, and it will end the so-called post-Second World War order that was created after 1945. It's finished, basically, unless they get their act together quickly.
Well, certainly, Prof, and I think what you are saying, and I know I've spoken to many analysts in the past as well, talking about the international order that exists at this point in time. And Shabnam, perhaps you'd just like to comment on this, on what Prof is saying about so-called international law, non-functional. And I know not very long ago you were in Turkey as well, where you met with a number of legal eagles from many other parts around the world. And just to gather your thoughts and with regard to international law, non-functional as well, and as Prof said, the straw that breaks the camel's back.
I think Prof makes some excellent points, and we have to see through the lens of sobriety and robustness the situation with which we are faced. Palestine raises the question starkly as to whether international law exists or it does not. Justice and survival for Palestine is justice and survival for the rest of the world, particularly people in the global south, people who are opposing neocolonialism, imperialism, and fascism. And we are right to criticize the role of these international courts, but it is very clear that the Zionist entity has a stranglehold over many institutions, including legal institutions, the judiciary, as well as business. And we see that in South Africa as well. We must make that very clear. We must be very honest about that. Despite South Africa having taken this case to the ICJ, and of course we're in full support of this case, our government still has diplomatic ties with the Zionist Israeli occupier. And at the same time, there are businesses and corporations profiteering from the genocide of the Palestinian people by selling coal to the Zionist entity. And so these matters have got to be challenged by civil society. Hope does not rest on one institution alone. In other words, the ICJ. It might be seen as having some form of legal legitimacy on the international platform. Its rulings inform international consensus, and it can trigger political and economic consequences in the form of boycott, sanctions, divestment, and the stopping of arms trade. They provide legal grounding for civil society, for parliaments, and for lawyers, even businesses, to withdraw from complicity. So justice is a collective effort, and the ICJ is a part of that effort, but it does not represent the entirety of that effort. As you correctly mentioned, Inayat, I, in February, participated in an excellent conference held by the International Legal Coalition for Palestine, which is bringing together groups and organizations using the law or lawfare, and particularly human rights law, to advocate for truth, for justice, and for the sovereignty and freedom of the Palestinian people. There were lawyers from around the world, including from Palestine, and the focus was on the ICC, the ICJ, and universal jurisdiction. It is on the latter, universal jurisdiction, in which we have a significant amount of power at a national level to be able to use these rulings to challenge the actions of governments, corporations, and other complicit stakeholders in this genocide and Holocaust of the Palestinian people. That includes prosecuting IOF, Israeli Occupation Forces recruits from South Africa and the rest of the African continent. Up till now, there have been no prosecutions, but through our collective efforts, supported by our ILCP, we intend to change that. Justice must be served, and it must be served now.
Yes, Bana, just looking at it from, the provisional measures that, as per the ICJ rulings, that have been ignored until now. And, we've seen over and over again Israel acting with impunity in the most hideous manner. And just looking at why or where does the problem actually lie that actually renders international law and even rulings by the ICJ ineffective?
Yes, it's important to mention that, some of these advisory opinions and generally advisory opinions are non-binding. That means that, the states and governments basically have to put pressure on the state to comply with international law. International law in general does not have teeth. That is something that a lot of international lawyers are aware of. It is not something that can be implemented. There's no mechanism to implement because there's no government, a world government at the moment. UN as well is under the same mechanism and under the same limitations. That is why, for example, we keep saying in the Palestinian, solidarity movement that states or people, communities need to put pressure on states to sanction, divest, and cut ties with Israel as a mechanism of pressuring them to comply with international law. That means that the only way international law can be implemented and can be respected is through political will. So that is why, for example, we see the targeting of UNRWA as a stark example of Israel's impunity. In the history of the world, not a single state has attacked UN agencies as Israel has done. So what they have actually done is they've attacked, not only, by the way, in Gaza, they've also done that in Lebanon with UNIFIL. They've attacked UNRWA, UN agencies. They've also attacked UN personnel, workers in the UN, also UN schools as well in Gaza. So that means that not only does Israel feel emboldened to break international law, they also feel emboldened to threaten the UN itself. In fact, there are talks within international lawyers and UN personnel, including the special rapporteur on Palestine, about unseating Israel from the UN. There are, of course, other talks about expelling Israel from the UN, but the unseating seems to be the first step.
Yes, and also I think Professor Mazin, two things that Bana referred to. One was political will, and the other pressure. Now, talking about international institutions like the United Nations or the International Criminal Court or the ICJ, Now, we've seen since South Africa has taken this case to the ICJ, the former Minister of International Relations, Dr. Naledi Pandor, at that point in time felt very, very strongly, and just following up from what Bana is saying, of reforming these international institutions because they are ineffective, and it is clear that Israel, the United States of America, and even we've seen recently, a country like Hungary that entertained Benjamin Netanyahu as well came under pressure because arrest warrants have been issued against Benjamin Netanyahu. We've seen Ben Gvir walking freely in the United States of America. We've seen Benjamin Netanyahu there. So we are going to have these countries that have absolutely no respect whatsoever for these international institutions.
Yes, indeed. What people around the world have been observing in shock and awe, if you want, that term was created during the first Gulf War, that there will be shock and awe in the next wars, basically, that we would terrify people in a way beyond belief. This is actually what is happening. You know, some people use the term that the U.S. and international order has given a green light to Israel basically to commit genocide by basically not respecting its own rules and conventions and even local rules and local laws. For example, in the U.S., there's a local law that's passed by Congress, the Leahy Amendment, that says they could not fund countries that persistently violate human rights. And yet the US is proceeding to violate regularly the law by supporting Israel committing violations. But anyway, people say it's giving a green light to Israel. I actually think it's more than that. It's actually jumping on board with both hands. It's like seeing somebody beat a kid to death and coming in and handing them sticks and then punching the kid a few times themselves to support the aggressor. This is what literally is happening. So it is an amazing phenomena, unprecedented in human history. By the way, even the Nazis did not commit the cruelties that are practiced by Israel, starving a whole population of 2 million people of water, medicine, food, bombing, carpet bombing Gaza, basically to destroy every single structure in Gaza that they are trying to destroy. This is unprecedented in so-called conflicts or wars. This is not a conflict or a war, by the way. This is a genocide extermination campaign.
Yes, Prof. Shabnam, I see you've got your finger up. Would you like to comment?
I would, on the subject of international institutions like the United Nations, which is central to the suffering of the Palestinian people, as opposed to genuine solidarity with the Palestinian people. This institution has failed numerous times to protect and advance the rights of Palestinian people, except through aid, through UNRWA. But in reality, there is a Security Council that exists unlawfully. There is no provision in the UN Constitution for the existence of a Security Council which consistently blocks and oppresses the rights of dispossessed and violated people, no matter what issue we're talking about, which conflict, which war, which genocide, and which Holocaust. And so I see it as an ineffective institution. I believe that Minister Pandor, Dr. Pandor, is absolutely correct to have raised this matter of reform of the UN. The question then becomes, can the UN be reformed? There are a number of countries, the outliers, so to speak, who consistently challenge the UN and its agencies. And they're excluded from conversations. They don't have a seat at the table. They're discriminated against, and often the victims of unilateral coercive measures such as sanctions for daring to speak out against what is loosely called the New World Order, and this move towards the one world government. The apartheid state of Israel is central to that, aiming to build this expansionist, murderous, greater Israel policy. And this greater Israel policy doesn't stop in the Middle East. It's very clear that the entity has its clutches in every country around the world. In fact, as I said at the ILCP conference, Palestine, in reality, in spirit, is the only country that is not occupied by the Zionist apartheid, racist, settler colonial state, which has been called Israel. And we need to learn a lot from Palestine to be able to resist what's coming, especially here on the African continent, where we are being threatened because of our solidarity with Palestinian people and oppressed people around the world.
Yes, Shabnam. And also, I think, Bana, when Shabnam speaks about the illegality of the UN Security Council and huge question marks that have been raised at all these international institutions, why do countries still, put their faith or place their reliance from an international law perspective on these institutions and organizations?
I think, if I were to be honest, I think there's a bit of nihilism in international relations at the moment. With the existence of the empire, people still believe that there is some form of justice that we can achieve through international law and some form of accountability through international law, and that is better than nothing. Of course, as long as the Security Council exists, and as long as veto power exists, the UN or international law mechanisms are useless. They remain to be at the hands of the powerful. They remain to be colonial, as they were from the starting point. In fact, international law has always been colonial. I just must mention that it's UN has been created with this impression that it is a peacekeeping force. But for Palestinians, we have historically seen the UN normalize not only Zionism but also our oppression. It first really started with the partition plan, where Palestine was divided, and that was in fact very colonial. That was a colonial task that the UN has accomplished, to say that settlers that came to Palestine had a right to the land in Palestine. And until today, we suffer as Palestinians the consequences of that partition plan. The idea that Israel is recognized as a state by all of these countries, members of the UN, that Israel is also a member of the UN and recognized as a full state with full rights. And the fact that this goes unabated, the fact that colonial powers historically, settler colonial powers as well historically, have just formulated and became states, recognized with power and with sovereignty, while colonized nations, indigenous peoples, suffer until today trying to reach self-determination, is very telling of these institutions and what they promote. So I think it's very important to be critical, to be aware of these dynamics, but also to know that yes, there is some form of worldwide kind of hope that some form, like the ICJ or the ICC, can provide some semblance of justice. However, the colonized, like Palestinians, are kind of aware of the colonial dynamics of international law. So we're not as hopeful as others are, but we see it as in fact one venue, and one very limited venue to achieve accountability.
Thanks for that, Bana. Prof. Mazin, I think what is also important to understand is, despite the question marks against these international institutions and how effective or ineffective they are, but what the ICJ hearings has done is exposed Israel to a large extent, and as Bana mentioned, as a full member of the United Nations. But it's actually exposed them horribly. And what we've seen, even in terms of the hearings, even when South Africa had taken the matter to the ICJ, the support from right across the entire world, many nations, many countries. But what it's actually done is it's woken up people to the realities, to the harsh realities of what this genocidal regime is all about.
Indeed, in normal legal systems, like within countries or states or within a city even, that has some laws. There's a level of justice that's addressed via implementation of the law, via, for example, judges issuing orders, and then police executing these orders, etc. When these lower courts fail, they go to appellate courts or some higher courts within the country. When you reach a level of international law, that means that local laws have failed to address the local injustice. And this injustice is not just a local injustice, but an injustice that threatens world peace, basically. That is why South Africa was correct in bringing the case at the ICJ, because obviously there's no local justice here. I live under an apartheid law here in the West Bank, where I have no justice, no legal representation, whereas Israeli Jews have legal representation and legal system that applies only to Jews, doesn't apply to me. So this is the essence of the problem and why it's important to go to international courts. Now, should international courts not succeed, the question becomes really, what's next? Where do we go next? If international system fails us, that's the highest courts on this planet Earth fails us, if you want, then we have only two choices. Either might makes right, which then becomes the law of the land, if you want, the law of the jungle, as they used to call, that whoever has the most power determines what rights they have, and the victims endure what they must. We, the victims, endure what we must. That's one way. Or the other way is to reassemble a global order that functions. I think the latter could happen. I think with the BRICS countries especially getting their act together to counteract the American imperial and Zionist power. BRICS, as you know, is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. At least it started with those countries, but now dozens of countries are lining up to join this new coalition, basically, that has challenged the hegemonic power of might makes right, and is looking for a multilateral world. And then we would create new ICJs that are truly empowered and that has enforcement mechanisms. The same thing with the International Criminal Court, by the way. It issued an arrest warrant, for example, for Netanyahu, but he flew to many countries. He flew over many countries who actually, by law, they should send their jets to intercept his flight and bring it down to face international justice. But if this doesn't work, then we have to have a new world order, as I said.
Yes, Prof. In fact, I see my engineer has asked me to go for an ad break, but just before we go for the ad break, and while this is fresh on my mind, Shabnam, Prof has been talking about BRICS. Now, I think yesterday we had this discussion about BRICS and its position as far as Israel is concerned. Now, we know that there are a number of countries, and the one country that was singled out, a country like India, for example, that has got very, very close ties with the Zionist entity. We've heard of Indians serving in the IDF as well, and they have this close relationship. In fact, when we see what is playing out in Kashmir at this point in time, which is about the same time that Palestine was occupied as well, the occupation of Kashmir mirrors the occupation of Palestine as well. And, when we're talking about reforming and a new international order with countries from within BRICS, one needs to be aware that there are those within BRICS who have this relationship, who have this association, and who are supportive, I must add, of the Zionist entity.
Thank you, Inayat. So certainly, I believe BRICS is a step in the right direction. But again, we have to look at it critically because civil society, you and I, have no seat at the table. So multilateralism on principle, excellent, we support it. We as civil society not seated at that table. If we were, we would be able to object to, or at least demand, the continued membership of India until it stops sending troops to the Zionist apartheid state to murder children. We would be able to demand an embargo against weapons sales from India to Israel or any other occupying or violating countries. And let me also be clear that people are not their governments, and governments are not their people. There are a number of people within India who vociferously oppose the actions of its government, both domestically and in relation to Palestine, as well as its perceived bootlicking of imperialism as represented by the US and the military-industrial complex. So with regards to India, also seemingly the government, that is, and the deep state, following this pattern of Israel in terms of colonialism and occupation and expansion, intended to drive the profiteering bottom line again of the military-industrial complex, and through its corporations to steal the resources of these regions, including Kashmir. We know Gaza, for example, is blessed or cursed with trillions of natural gas just off its coast. And many of us who do the analysis from an economic perspective are very clear that a driving force behind the intended annihilation of the Palestinian people is that natural gas, is the proximity to the coast, is that fertile land, and of course, as a conduit to be able to expand into the rest of the Middle East. And so as the ILCP in the African chapter of which I am coordinator, we are also focusing on accountability from corporations such as British Gas, British Petroleum, which are involved in contracting with the Zionist state for access to Palestinian resources. And let me just close by saying that Minister Dr. Pandor, who spoke at the ILCP conference, raised BRICS, but she also raised South Africa and this constant refrain of former President Nelson Mandela that South Africa is not free until Palestine is free. And I think that's true for every country around the world. No country will be free until Palestine is free. We have to use multi-pronged approaches, including the lawfare, but also the advocacy, the journalism, the economic strategies to ensure that Palestine is liberated, and in doing so, liberate the rest of the world from the occupation of the New World Order.
Thank you for that, Shabnam. We're going to go for a quick break. So to all our panelists, we're going to just put you on hold for a few minutes. We'll be back.
Valley's Motor Spares. We supply motor spares and accessories for all makes and models of motor cars, LDVs, bakkies, trucks, and earth-moving equipment. We deliver on time, every time. Please contact us via WhatsApp on 014-592-0925 or call 014-592-0925 or visit 28 Zenderling Street, Rustenburg. Remember the name, Valley's Motor Spares.
Kids these days are smart, and when you're competing for their attention against their smartphones, you need to make smart choices, like using Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil in every meal you make. It's naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether you're cooking, frying, or baking, you get the great tasting results that'll get their attention faster than the latest app. And if that doesn't work, change the Wi-Fi password. Sunfoil. Now we're cooking.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Al Bayt Lodge. Your true home away from home. Al Bayt is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities. Conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities. Your stay will be truly unforgettable, as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Al Bayt has to offer. For reservations, call 041-583-6415. or visit www.albaytlodge.co.za.
Aman means safety.
The Aman School of Excellence in Finetown, South Africa, is securing the futures of underprivileged children by providing world-class education in a safe and nurturing environment. Sponsor a child for only 15,000 Rand per year or any amount. a quality education at Amman presents a pathway out of poverty and a brighter future for South Africa.
Africa Muslims Agency. Empowering, educating, inspiring.
Yasin Badat Financial Advisory. Are your financial goals feeling out of reach? Yasin Badat Financial Advisory is here to turn your aspirations into achievements. Our dedicated team, armed with a history of success, is ready to guide you through the complex nature of financial and investment planning. Whether you're a seasoned investor or new to the game, our personalized solutions cater to your unique goals and risk appetite. Trust in our commitment to transparency, integrity, and excellence. Ready to unlock a world of financial freedom? Partner with us today. Call Yasin Badat Financial Advisory at +27 33 346 2071 or visit www.yasinbadat.com. Yasin Badat Financial Advisory, guiding you to financial success.
Make a conscious choice. Sip for change and support Palestine Drinks Africa. With every can, you help end the genocide and stand in solidarity with Palestine. Choose between our original or sugar-free options, available in a case of 24. Every sip is a step towards justice. Every purchase, a powerful message of unity and Palestinian cause. Contact 082-888-1440 or 082-7739-556 today and be part of the change. Palestine Drinks Africa. Sip for change. Liberty for everyone.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media.
Welcome back as we continue with our discussion in conversation with United Wadi this Wednesday evening with my panelists, Professor Mazin, Qumsiyeh, Bana Abu Zuluf, and Shabnam Mohamed. And we are talking about the ICJ, taking a look at the latest playing out in The Hague and also in terms of the hearings. Now, Bana, we knew when South Africa took the matter to the ICJ that we were going to be in for a long haul. We were not expecting instant results, but it is clear that patience is running out, particularly from people on the ground, from activists. And at the same time, what we've also seen over this period of time, we've seen this Zionist entity become more bold, more brazen in its contempt for the United Nations, for the ICJ. We've seen the hostility towards the United Nations, to UNRWA as well. And also, at the end of the day, what we've learned is Israel being so bold and brazen and arrogant that they want to put these institutions on trial rather than them being on trial.
Yes, certainly. I think the most important element here is a procedural maybe fault or flaw in the international law mechanisms like the ICJ, which is that they act as in ex post facto, which is basically that they act retrospectively. So that means that they have to wait until an event happens where a crime is committed or potentially a crime is allegedly committed, and then they investigate, and based off of that, they make the decision. The problem is that means the people who are enduring that or suffering will not receive justice. In fact, the suffering will not stop because of the fact that the trial or procedure will go long, and that means that the people will not be served justice. In fact, right now this is the main problem for people in Gaza, is that they're witnessing and they're aware that there's an ICJ hearing, they're aware that there's a case, they're also aware there's an ICC arrest warrant, but they're also aware that it means nothing because even the ICJ hearing that are happening, they started on the 28th of April, and now they're continuing until May 2nd. But the actual decision will only take as far as 3 months or even further for them to decide exactly what are the obligations of Israel in terms of facilitating humanitarian aid. I don't think people can wait in Gaza. In fact, actually, the process of waiting itself can be very violent. And in fact, a lot of people argue whether critical international lawyers or not, they would argue that, in fact, this is very necropolitical. That means that the UN agencies and the top court of the UN, the ICJ, can basically decide and have the power to decide whose life is worthy or not by making this sort of procedural delays. And in fact, this is just a fault of the actual ICJ court and system itself, that the procedures themselves create this dynamic, that there is a prolonged process, and people in Gaza and elsewhere that are suffering, that are in have these type of cases opened, they cannot wait. Genocide, people who are enduring genocide cannot wait for a hearing. People as well, countries and states should not, in fact, wait to continue their obligation, their legal obligation to prevent genocide. That means that they must not provide weapons, they must not assist in any way with the genocide. That, of course, follows through with countries like Germany, countries like the US, countries like Britain, etc. And that means that we are at a space right now where we're speaking of a possibility of a decision in the future that is maybe that is, for now, we know because it's an advisory opinion, will be non-binding, and for the people of Gaza, they will be given the impression that this decision holds any weight, but in fact, in reality, it does not. So I think the job really lies on the people, the communities, governments, but also the groups that need to lobby governments and states. People need to know that this has to do pretty much with politics, and you cannot divorce politics from court proceedings.
To now, one begins to question how distant that future is, how distant that final decision is going to be made. Whether we're going to even see it in our lifetimes, I'm not too sure at this point in time, Prof. And perhaps, Prof, if you could just comment on the urgency of this matter, because we've seen throughout these latest submissions talking about humanitarian aid, talking about how it is actually being used as a weapon of war. But the fact of the matter is the court has extended and granted Israel a 6-month delay to actually respond. So these hearings are taking place, and Israel's just been playing for time after time after time, while it continues with its illegal occupation, while it continues with its genocide, and while it continues with its murderous expansionist policy.
Indeed, you point out the major problem here. When you have a murderer and is clearly engaged in murder and extermination, and you say to this murderer, well, present your defense. Well, you can't just say, well, you have another 6 months to continue killing, and then at your convenience, if you kindly please send us some information about why you are butchering these people. This is the essence of what we see here. It's a farce, basically. It's and that is why I said, earlier, that this is dropping all the masks on international law, and whether it really will function or not function, it's becoming more obvious. As Bana also said, the situation has made it that Gaza is a guiding light, basically shedding light on all of this, and is forcing humanity to look in the mirror, basically. Look in the mirror and see, where are we? What are we doing? Are we really concerned about a few million people being killed here and there? Or are we more concerned about Elon Musk and Donald Trump and Netanyahu making more money? What is it that this global order is about? This is the essence of the dilemma, the essence of the contradictions that is, as I said, putting everybody on the spotlight. And they either put up or shut up, as they say. And what we are seeing is not encouraging at all for us. And there was a professor of international law in England who, close to retirement, who wrote his students and said, I'm sorry I was teaching you about international law. It seems that this was all a waste of time, that we are entering an era of might makes right. And in fact, maybe that's the era that we were in anyway. And the reason he said that also is he was looking at, how the US basically exonerated itself from its own crimes in Vietnam, for example, with Agent Orange and other situations where basically if you have a veto power at the UN Security Council, then it really doesn't matter what other countries think or what common sense dictates or what law written is. What matters is the might. So from 1945 until today, really many of us are feeling that international law has failed us. In fact, the first violation of the order that was created post-1945 was 1947 partition resolution of Palestine, which was done against the wishes of the local people, even though the UN Charter says that self-determination and respect for the wishes of the local people. So obviously the UN itself and all its subservient mechanisms, be it the ICJ or the ICC, are not, started to be violated from 1947 with that partition resolution.
Yes, Prof. And also, Shabnam, we're talking about the credibility of this process within the ICJ and also considering the urgency of the matter. But once again, we know many governments obviously have now jumped in and they've made their submissions. And just to put it simplistically, they go to the ICJ, they present their cases, they come back. And then what happens? Now, this is where, I'd like your thoughts, where domestically, within our own countries, within our own societies, within civil society, within the activist society, and here we're talking of journalists as well, all of this actually put together to put pressure internally on your governments that you are going to the ICJ. Yes, we acknowledge, we applaud you, we do whatever we can, but at the end of the day, we still want to see results. Now, just some of your thoughts in terms of how, we can do it. We're fortunate in South Africa where we have a lot more freedom than many other countries. And this includes many of the Arab countries where even protests against Israel or protests for Palestine, in favor of Palestine, are actually banned and not allowed. We know that there are a few African countries as well that do not allow for these type of protests. But for countries where we've got leverage, where we have the opportunity, what do we do?
So again, the multi-pronged approach is the most effective, a combination of lawfare, activism or advocacy, economic strategies, but also education and outreach at a grassroots level to be able to help those people who actually don't know what's going on or are sitting on the fence to understand why those of us in this movement for the liberation of Palestine and by extension the world are as committed to this cause as we are. Certainly bringing more numbers across to the liberation movement is going to help the cause of Palestine and freedom around the world. And of course, I must underscore the importance of the arts because the arts changes the world faster than politics can. So the use of visual art, for example, and films, we've seen some very effective films. The latest controversial one is called Settlers, which is the settlers in their own words, which are apparently shocking many people who didn't realize the kind of toxic conduct that these people with impunity engage in. So the power of film is also very important. On a national level, I would say that we have to bring applications to compel, perhaps against our own government, for the cutting of diplomatic ties and against corporations that are profiteering from the genocide by selling coal, for example. And African Rainbow Minerals is one of those corporations that's benefit from the selling of coal to the Zionist state, which continues the Holocaust of the Palestinian people. And so those are some other strategies that we have to look at a national level. There has to be advocacy at a parliamentary level as well to make sure that our voices are heard in that space, and that we do not support political parties who are either in support of the Holocaust of the Palestinian people or are choosing to remain silent. There are various forms of implementing legislation that have been submitted to the Parliament of South Africa that have not been enforced as well. Then, of course, you have the case of the National Prosecuting Authority, which to date has not prosecuted any of the people who are serving in the IOF that have been reported to the MPA with evidence. And so it shows that our legal system is infected, and it has been affected by the apartheid state, which of course has held a long relationship with apartheid South Africa. And so those elements of those relationships certainly remain. On the African continent, Inayat, I'm blessed to do quite a bit of travel through my work in the health, freedom, human rights, and anti-war space. And certainly there is an enormous amount of support for the Palestinian cause. But let us be very clear as African people. We have a situation where the DRC, the blood diamonds being extracted from the people of the DRC, is profiteering Israeli billionaires using that same money to fund the genocide of the Palestinian people. We have a situation where South Africa is being targeted for having taken the stance at the ICJ. We have a case where Lesotho is being supported against South Africa at the United Nations over a territorial dispute. We have Israel building military bases in Somaliland, in the Horn of Africa. Then you have a situation where Burkina Faso and its president, Ibrahim Traore, are being threatened by the imperialists for having the self-determination to say, we stand against imperialism and neocolonialism. Our resources belong to us. You will trade with us with respect, or you will not trade with us. So in all of these African country examples that I've raised, imperialism as represented by the US, Israel, Australia, and others, including the Arab states, are targeting Africa, and we have to be awake to the fact that they all ultimately end up benefiting the aims of these imperialist agendas. So there's a lot of work to be done on the African continent. What we are planning as the ILCP, International Legal Coalition for Palestine Africa chapter, is a Truth and Restoration Commission, a TRC, on Palestine. And I'd be very honored if the three of you would please join us in that TRC. It's going to be monthly online and then a physical event. And it will focus on specific subjects for each of those online and physical events. The physical event is going to be a 3-day event, with the first day being a focus on the Truth and Restoration Commission on Palestine. The second day is going to be a conference on Africa and Palestine. Where are the common enemies? How do we show each other solidarity? And the last day is going to be focused on Palestinian arts and culture, and of course, African arts and culture. We've had artists reach out to us from Gaza to say, please exhibit our work to the world. And so, of course, you are all invited, as is your audience. But the time is not one for despair. Palestinians don't need us to be despair. We have to be people who take action in their interests, but remembering that they make the decisions and we support them.
Well, thank you for that, Shabnam, and also for the invitation. And obviously, you know, you have our support. You have my support as well, and would obviously be very much a part of this initiative. Bana, while the deliberations are taking place, while the debates are taking place at the International Court of Justice, while hearings are taking place, just in your mind, what more can the international community do? Or what should the international community be doing?
I think there's a lot to do. I do agree that national courts should start prosecuting any nationals that have served in the IOF during the genocide and committed genocide. I think this is a great initiative, and we have a Hind Foundation that has started already helping and facilitating this globally. But also it's very important to note that there are certain things can also be utilized. There's also in the Apartheid Convention, there's Article 3F, I could be wrong, if please correct me if I am, but there's also the Article 3F that states that those who prosecute protesters or prevent protesters that are, protesting apartheid, they are themselves committing apartheid. So in fact, those protesting apartheid, and of course, the Zionist entity has already been recognized as an apartheid regime. It's very important that countries that are preventing those protesters, in fact, also prosecuting protesters, to know that actually they themselves are participating in apartheid, that also constitutes apartheid. This is one way that activists can also pressure governments that they cannot prevent protests. So they cannot prevent people from practicing their right to assembly, but also that they are committing apartheid. There's just one thing that I think I would like to just mention that maybe is a development that people need to be aware of in conjunction with the ICJ case. We have currently in the ICC as well a very bad development, if I must say, that there was an appeal made by Israel on the jurisdiction argument. So they're arguing that the ICC has no jurisdiction to the occupied territories. That means they argue that because of the Oslo Accords and because for them they argue Palestine is not a state because it does not fulfill the requirements of a state, that this cancels the jurisdiction of the ICC. Previously, the ICC has voted to argue that, in fact, no, this is not true. They have full jurisdiction. But now they have backed down and said that the lower courts have to actually, they have to listen to Israel's arguments about jurisdiction again. That means there will be a delay as well in the actual prosecution. But also, it's important to note that does not mean that there is a cancellation for the arrest warrants. A lot of people are arguing that this means the cancellation for arrest warrants. And we can see that some governments actually are arguing for this and are saying that this makes it easier for them to avoid, in fact, arresting either Netanyahu or Gallant when they visit their countries. So this is a very dangerous development, of course, that it aligns, unfortunately, with the delay that the ICJ has provided with the 6 months. So I think we need to also start pushing a little bit more, because I think at the beginning when people were starting to question the ICJ and ICC, it put a lot of pressure on them. But right now there's a huge amount of undue and not even needed praise of these mechanisms. And I think it's important as well, again, to go back and pressure those courts to say that international law, in fact, is under the rubble right now, and it's also on trial as well. So we must also, as a community, raise these questions. Why is the ICJ and ICC, letting the US and also other governments to pressure them politically, whether with the US pressuring the ICC or other governments pressuring with the ICJ case?
Appropriately, when you talk about international law being under the rubble, and it's just such a powerful, such a profound statement to actually made in the context of what we are discussing. Prof, we've got a few minutes, and I'm just going to go around, starting off with you in a minute or two, just some final thoughts before we end of the program. I'll go to Shabnam, and thereafter I'll ask Bana to have the last word.
Thank you very much for doing this. It falls on all of us humans to work towards peace, towards justice, towards human rights, and not to accept the status of might makes right. So I ask everybody, we all are responsible, after all, for saving our planet, whether it's related to a regional war in Palestine, genocide that's ongoing, or related to the climate change, which is another injustice that's happening with impunity, that people are getting away literally with burning our planet. We all have responsibility to act. I'm glad South Africa is acting. We need more countries to act. We need more people to act. And I thank you again for this opportunity.
And we thank you as well, Prof, for accepting our invitation and coming on. Shabnam?
Our destinies are inextricably intertwined as people who face oppression, continued oppression from the weapons of mass destruction represented by the New World Order. And so, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, they've all made very powerful statements about an injustice to one is an injustice to all. An injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And we as South African and African activists for freedom have inculcated those philosophies into ourselves. So we are always going to stand on the side of the oppressed, but at the same time, we do so from a position of strength and not as victims. One of our greatest visions is to see a liberated Palestine, understanding that that is the key to the liberation of the rest of the world. Ultimately, the power of the people is greater than people in power. Free Palestine, free Africa, free the world.
Thanks, Shabnam. Bana?
Just to finish it up, I think it's very important to note that the court cases are causing a lot of geopolitical tensions, but governments like the South African government because I am now actually in South Africa myself, I must say that they must not compromise on those political tensions and threats that they're receiving. In fact, this is about the protection of one's dignity, but also of Palestinian dignity. So we must maintain that the integrity of ourselves and the solidarity struggle with Palestinians, that we must not let those threats control not only the dynamic but also the decisions made by the governments here and elsewhere. So I reiterate what my colleagues have said, that the struggle for Palestine has revealed a lot about the world, but also it has revealed that there's a lot to do, but also it's all about people power. First and foremost, is about people power. We can talk about court cases all day. We talk about international law all day. But what's more important and more valuable is building people power for change.
Well, it certainly has. And I think from the onset and from when this genocide started, the statement that we've repeated over and over again, that Gaza obviously is going to be changing the world. It will be determining what a new world order look like, and it's actually going to change the world forever. And I think we're seeing a lot of that change on the ground as well. But to you, Prof. Mazin Qumsiyeh, to Bana Abu Zuluf, and to Shabnam Mohamed, we thank you. We do appreciate you taking time out with us this evening in conversation with us right here on Salam Media. All the best to all three of you.
Shukran. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Well, that brings us to the end of this very, very interesting but also absorbing broadcast, and a lot that we need to think about. And this is a question that I'm going to be leaving you with. Without enforcement powers and rulings that are non-binding, is there any hope in your mind that these international institutions like the ICJ can ever ensure that justice will be served? And I leave you with that question. With that, from myself and everybody else here at Salam Media, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.